Ethan Walker knew something was wrong the moment he realized he had started memorizing the sound of Ryan Miller's laughter just to prove to himself it still existed. 5 years together should have built something solid, something that didn't tremble every time a phone buzzed. Yet Ethan now stood in the narrow hallway of their apartment, listening to Ryan laugh in the living room, the sound light and effortless in a way it hadn't been with him for months. The door was half closed. The laughter was not meant for him. When Ryan finally emerged, phone in hand, his smile faded into something polite. "Work," Ryan said before Ethan could ask. Ethan nodded, even though he hadn't spoken. That was how things worked now, anticipation instead of conversation. At dinner that night, Ryan scrolled more than he chewed. Ethan talked about his week at the architecture firm, about a project he had almost secured, about how he'd driven past open land on the outskirts of the city and felt something shift in his chest. Ryan responded with distracted hums, his thumb moving in restless arcs across the screen. "You're quiet," Ethan finally said. "I'm tired," Ryan replied. "It's been intense lately." Intense. The word covered everything and explained nothing. Later, when Ryan left his phone on the kitchen counter, Ethan didn't intend to look. He told himself that as his gaze lingered. The screen lit up with a message preview. "Last night meant more than you think." No name. Just a number. Ethan's stomach tightened, not from anger but from recognition. He had been bracing for something without admitting it. Ryan returned before Ethan could decide what to do with what he'd seen. Their eyes met for half a second, long enough for guilt to flicker across Ryan's face before it rearranged into annoyance. "You're not going through my phone, are you?" Ryan asked. "I wasn't," Ethan said quietly. "But maybe I should." Ryan exhaled sharply. "It's nothing. A client who drinks too much and texts too much. Don't start imagining things." Ethan wanted to believe him. Belief was easier than confrontation. Belief meant the last 5 years weren't dissolving into suspicion and silence, but that night, lying beside Ryan's turned back, Ethan understood something painful. Even if Ryan hadn't crossed a line, he had already stepped away. The next morning, Ethan called in sick to work. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold and searched for something he hadn't thought about in years: horses for sale. It felt almost absurd, like trying on a childhood dream to escape an adult disappointment. Growing up, Ethan had spent summers on his uncle's small farm, brushing down aging mares and pretending the wide fields were his. He had once promised himself that when he could afford it, he would own land. Something steady. Something honest. A listing caught his eye: quarter horse gelding, trained, well-mannered. Inquiries to Caleb Hayes. Attached was a photograph of a broad-shouldered chestnut horse standing against a backdrop of open sky and fencing that seemed to stretch forever. Impulsively, Ethan sent a message. The reply came within the hour. "You're welcome to come see him. Ranch is an hour west. Caleb. No emojis. No sales pitch. Just an address." Ethan told Ryan he needed space to think about. Thus, Ryan barely looked up from his laptop. "Do what you need to do," he said. Already elsewhere, the drive out of the city felt longer than an hour. Buildings gave way to open fields, concrete softening into dust and grass. Ethan rolled down the window, letting wind replace the recycled air he had been breathing for months. When he arrived, the ranch looked exactly like the photograph: wide, unpretentious, grounded. A barn stood weathered but sturdy, and the air carried the scent of hay and sun-warmed earth. Caleb Hayes emerged from the barn as Ethan stepped out of his car. He was taller than Ethan expected, wearing worn jeans and a faded denim shirt rolled at the sleeves. There was nothing performative about him. He moved with the quiet assurance of someone who knew his land and didn't need to impress anyone. "You must be Ethan," Caleb said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm, steady. "I am," Ethan replied. "I came about the horse." Caleb studied him for a moment, longer than necessary. "Not invasive but perceptive. Most people who come out here know exactly what they're looking for," Caleb said. "You look like you're still deciding." The words weren't accusatory. They were observant. Ethan swallowed. "Maybe I am." Caleb gestured toward the pasture. "Come on. I'll show you around." As they walked side by side toward the fencing, Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not relief, not attraction, not yet. It was quieter than that. It was the absence of noise. For the first time in months, no one was asking him to compete with a screen. No one was dismissing his questions before he asked them. Caleb paused by the gate and glanced at him. "Whatever you came here for," Caleb said evenly, "you don't have to rush deciding." The wind moved through the grass, bending it without breaking it. Ethan looked out over the open field and realized he wasn't thinking about the horse anymore, and that frightened him more than the message on Ryan's phone ever had. Ethan Walker told himself he stayed the night because he needed more time to evaluate the horse. That explanation sounded reasonable enough when he said it aloud, but even he could hear the thinness beneath it. The truth was simpler. He wasn't ready to return to an apartment that felt colder than the open fields of Caleb Hayes's ranch. Caleb didn't question him. He only nodded once and said, "Guest rooms down the hall. Dinner's at 7. We eat simple out here." Simple, Ethan was beginning to understand, did not mean shallow. The evening unfolded without performance. They checked the fencing along the north pasture first, Ethan holding the tools while Caleb tightened wire with efficient precision. Caleb explained the horse's temperament: steady under pressure, responsive to tone more than force. As he spoke, Ethan noticed how carefully Caleb chose his words, how he never exaggerated, never rushed to fill silence. "Animals know when you're unsure," Caleb said, testing the fence with a firm shake. "They don't judge it. But they feel it." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "People judge it." Caleb glanced at him. "Only the ones who are unsure themselves." The comment lingered longer than the fading sunlight. Dinner was grilled vegetables, steak, and bread warmed in the oven. They ate on the porch overlooking the pasture, the sky bruised purple as night settled in. No traffic, no notifications, no tension vibrating beneath the table. Just the steady rhythm of crickets and the occasional soft sound of horses shifting in the distance. "You ever live anywhere but the city?" Caleb asked. "I grew up visiting my uncle's farm," Ethan said. "I used to think I'd end up somewhere like this. Then life got louder." Caleb gave a faint smile. "Loud doesn't always mean alive." Ethan studied him in the dim porch light. "You've always lived here?" "Came back after my marriage ended," Caleb replied, his tone even. "Figured I'd rather rebuild something honest than pretend something broken was whole." The word struck closer than Caleb could have known. Ethan's phone vibrated on the table, shattering the fragile calm. He glanced at the screen and felt the blood drain from his face. An unknown number. A message containing 2 photographs, Ryan Miller seated across from a man Ethan had never seen before. The lighting was intimate, the table close. In the second image, Ryan's hand rested over the other man's wrist, their heads inclined toward each other in a way Ethan recognized too well. The timestamp read 3 nights ago, during the late client meeting. Caleb's gaze sharpened. "Bad news?" Ethan swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "It's confirmation." He stood and stepped away from the porch before opening Ryan's contact. His fingers trembled only once before he pressed call. Ryan answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey. You okay?" Ethan stared out at the darkened pasture. "Who is he?" Silence pulsed on the other end. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ryan replied, but the denial lacked conviction. "I have pictures," Ethan said quietly. "Don't lie to me again." Another pause. Then a sigh heavy with irritation rather than remorse. "It just happened," Ryan said. "It didn't mean anything. We were drinking." "You've been distant too, Ethan." "Distant?" Ethan almost laughed at the inversion of blame. 5 years, he said instead. "And you reduce it to, it didn't mean anything." "You're overreacting," Ryan insisted. "We can fix this." Ethan realized something in that moment, not about Ryan, but about himself. The sharpest pain wasn't jealousy. It was the exhaustion of trying to remain chosen by someone who had already wandered. "I'll call you when I'm back," Ethan said, though he knew he wouldn't. He ended the call before Ryan could respond. When he returned to the porch, Caleb hadn't moved. He didn't ask for details. He simply handed Ethan a glass of water and waited. "He admitted it," Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Said it meant nothing." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. It meant enough to risk you. The simplicity of that truth cut deeper than any accusation. Ethan sank into the chair. I don't know who I am without him. We built everything together. Caleb leaned back, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. If you have to disappear to keep something, it isn't built. It's borrowed. The word settled into Ethan's bones. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The night wrapped around them, intimate but not invasive. Ethan became acutely aware of Caleb's presence, steady, grounded, not demanding anything from him. I don't want to make decisions out of anger, Ethan said finally. Good, Caleb replied. Decisions made in anger usually keep you tied to what hurt you. Their eyes met, and the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. Ethan felt the pull of something honest, something patient. It would be easy, in this fragile state, to reach for comfort without clarity. Instead, he stood. I need to go back, Ethan said. Not tonight. But soon. I need to end it the right way. Caleb nodded once, respect evident in the gesture. Finish what you start. As Ethan stepped off the porch and looked out over the dark pasture, he understood that the hardest part wasn't discovering Ryan's betrayal. It was choosing what kind of man he would be next, and for the first time in months, that choice felt like it belonged entirely to him. Ethan Walker left the ranch at dawn. The sky was pale and undecided, hovering between night and morning, much like the life he was about to step back into. Caleb Hayes stood near the barn when Ethan loaded his bag into the car, offering no dramatic farewell, only a steady look that carried both patience and expectation. You don't owe me an explanation, Caleb said. I owe myself one, Ethan replied. Caleb nodded once. Then make it honest. The drive back to the city felt shorter than before, not because the distance had changed, but because Ethan's hesitation had. He wasn't returning to argue. He was returning to conclude. When Ethan unlocked the apartment door, the familiar scent of polished wood and expensive cologne greeted him like a memory already fading. Ryan Miller sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, expression guarded. You disappeared, Ryan said, closing the screen. I was starting to think you weren't coming back. I almost didn't, Ethan answered calmly. Ryan studied him, searching for volatility and finding none. Look, about the other night, there's no need to rehearse it, Ethan interrupted gently. You told me it meant nothing. Ryan stood, frustration sharpening his posture. It didn't. It was a mistake. People make mistakes. Mistakes are accidents, Ethan said. Choices are deliberate. Ryan's jaw tightened. So that's it? You're throwing away 5 years because of one bad decision. Ethan felt the old instinct to defend, to negotiate, to soften the edges. Instead, he let silence do its work. I'm not leaving because you cheated, Ethan said at last. I'm leaving because somewhere along the way, you stopped choosing me. And I stayed anyway. Ryan's expression flickered, not with guilt, but with the discomfort of losing control over the narrative. You've been distant for months, Ryan countered. You act like I did this alone. Ethan absorbed the deflection without absorbing the blame. If I was distant, it was because I felt alone while standing next to you. The truth settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. We can fix it. Therapy. Time. Whatever you want. Ethan looked around the apartment, the curated art, the carefully selected furniture, the life built on shared ambition. It had once felt like achievement. Now it felt like evidence of how much he had been willing to endure to keep appearances intact. I don't want to fix something that requires me to shrink, Ethan said quietly. I want something that doesn't make loyalty feel optional. Ryan's shoulders sagged slightly, but pride kept him upright. So you're just walking away? Yes. There was no shouting, no slammed doors. Only the soft finality of a decision made without anger. Ethan packed what he needed: clothes, a few personal books, the photograph from his uncle's farm he had kept tucked in a drawer for years. When he stepped outside with his bag, he expected grief to hit him like a wave. Instead, what came was clarity. Painful, yes, but clean. The drive back to the ranch felt different this time. Not like escape. Like intention, Caleb was repairing a gate when Ethan pulled in. The rhythmic sound of metal against wood echoed across the yard. Caleb looked up as Ethan approached, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You finished it," Caleb said, not as a question. "I did." Caleb searched his face for hesitation. "And?" Ethan exhaled slowly. It hurt less than staying would have. A flicker of understanding crossed Caleb's features. He leaned against the fence, giving Ethan space to speak. "I didn't come back for the horse," Ethan continued. "At least, not only for that. I came back because when I was here, I didn't feel like I had to compete for honesty." Caleb's gaze softened, though his stance remained steady. "I never wanted you here out of rebound or anger." "I know," Ethan said. "That's why I left first." The wind moved through the pasture, carrying the scent of hay and something quietly hopeful. Caleb stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, marks not of age, but of endurance. "I don't want to own you," Caleb said evenly. "I want you to choose to stay. Every day." Ethan felt the weight of that distinction. Ownership was possession. Choice was commitment. "I'm choosing," Ethan replied, not impulsively. Not out of loneliness, but out of recognition. Caleb held his gaze for a long moment before offering a small, genuine smile. "Then let's start simple. You still need to learn how to ride him properly." Ethan let out a quiet laugh, the sound unfamiliar in its ease. "Guess I'm staying a while," he said. "Guess you are." As Caleb walked with him toward the barn, Ethan glanced once toward the open field stretching